Welcome back to Igua Zoo, everyone. Today, we tackle the jaguar habitat with this truly amazing habitat, which I'm going to say is probably my best work yet. But it's not just about the jaguar today. We definitely have some updates from Justin O'Brien and his search for the missing alpaca herd, as well as a quick update on our Baird's tapir from our previous episode as well. But our first build is really going to be the Sunshade, which is nothing too fancy. We're just taking some wood beams that are painted, adjusting the color to black, and creating an overall frame. Now, a lot of the feedback I've received from the community was always about utilizing inspirational photos to create something truly amazing. And this is something that I use some inspiration for. So huge shout out to Pinterest for helping me define all these. And my Pinterest is now full of South American zoos, so I have that going for me. Now with our frame created, I utilized some various flexi-color pieces of bamboo to create the sunshade itself. Now this is really only step one, and off camera I'm going to go back through and add a bunch of moss. It's going to help to provide some additional coverage. And if you really want to see how it all came together, you can join or tune into our live streams, because this is actually built on live stream, which was really fun. And the community really helped to kind of create this and put it all together. Now, while you see this coming together, you're probably wondering, hey, we're back in a speed build. And you're right. I actually really like speed builds. I find them super cathartic to watch, especially when I'm at work and things like that. So I'm going to revert back to speed build. I have a lot more fun doing this, and it also means I can provide more updates on planetzoo, which is really important because I love playing planetzoo for all of the really cool things that you can create and challenge yourself to become better. Now, speaking of bamboo, this overall sunshade was kind of looking a little bland, a little dreary, and another way for me to spice it up a little bit was to add in some additional bamboo sections as more of a runner on the bottom of our viewing station. And again, we followed the same idea. Placed down some bamboo, colored everything differently, put it all into one piece, and then copied it all the way across. And you can really see it kind of coming together. Now, if you are a fan of sunshades or planetzoo in general, help support the channel. Leave a like, drop a comment, and even subscribe if you're feeling up to it. But of course, remember, there's really no pressure to do so. We're all really in it just to play planetzoo and see these amazing habitats come together. Now, with our sunshade set up, and our initial positioning figured out, it's time for us to work on a little bit of the exterior. And I'm going about this build a little weird. Normally I would outline everything and do everything all at once. So if I was doing the barrier, I would do all of the barrier. But I'm going to change it up a little bit. And part of the reason why is because I want to see how everything looks as I start moving through the build. And there's a reason for that. And you're going to notice as I go through and add things in and start building up this habitat, you're also going to notice that those things disappear over time, more so because I'm looking back at it, realizing that maybe my initial idea wasn't working out. Now, I will say one thing that did stick around was this amazing barrier wall with the bamboo between two broken sections of temple wall. I thought it looked really cool, and I kind of stuck with it. And these are one of the cool things that's going to make this habitat look a little bit more unique. Now, I'm also keeping in mind that our foliage plots have to look a little bit different. We really want to kind of identify that this is going to be a habitat build. So really easily just use some temple panels, some mulch, and then a lot of additional foliage. Now, in my last episode for the Baird's tapir, I did ask for some name ideas, and I just want to do a shout out to Seijio Trim for Bo and Teresa. But exciting news, we have a new baby tapir that we also have to name. So leave your name suggestions in the comments below, and we're going to choose the best one by popular vote. And lastly, an update from Justin O'Brien, who has been searching for the missing alpaca herd. And while he hasn't found the herd, he has found another alpaca. And at this point, it's determined that this herd has moved on, so it might be time for us to create a permanent habitat for some new alpacas. Now, returning back to our jaguar habitat, for the rest of the interior of the build, I'm actually utilizing some inspiration from the Audubon Zoo found in New Orleans, and specifically a giant anteater and two-toed sloth exhibit. Now, this is actually in Jaguar Jungle, which is the area, and that's how I actually found it, because I was looking for some inspiration for it on Pinterest, but the idea really works. So the concept for this habitat for our jaguar is that we're utilizing an old temple area to act as the habitat or exhibit itself. And there's a few ways that we're trying to incorporate a lot of these different temple builds to create our habitat, but at the same time creating something that's super lush, and it looks like the temple has been overrun by the jungle. And when I think of temples, especially temples from indigenous peoples, I always think of these really cool looking pools of water. And I don't know if maybe it's just the idea of playing some Tomb Raider and I've played a lot of Tomb Raider in the past. You see these really cool temples and they always have some type of water feature, and I wanted to create that. So I added in a pool of water, and I really wanted to have it fed by a waterfall. Now, it looks pretty bad right now, and I think that's part of the joy playing Planet Zoo. Is you're going to build something, and you're going to realize like, hey, this doesn't quite work out. And this is a perfect example of that coming together. So I went through all this work, put together this little pool of water fed with a waterfall, and then I get rid of it all and change it all the way up again, and you're going to see what it looks like at the very end. But I really wanted to keep this in here for you guys to see, because sometimes when you build something, it looks really cool, you're really happy with it, but you're going to learn that maybe it just doesn't work. Or even better, you're going to have a stroke of inspiration halfway through your build, and you're going to want to go back and change it up. Now, to help blend everything in and break it up, because right now it just looks like an empty box, I've added in a lot of different flair from the temple pack to just spruce it up, make it look a little bit more temple-ish, if you will. And this is actually one of the first times I've utilized these corner pieces from the South America pack, and it looks really cool. And at the end of the day, if you're really happy with what you've built, that's really all that matters. As long as you enjoy it, it means it's a good build. Now, with our water feature complete, it's time for us to work on the back half of our habitat. So remember, this is supposed to be an old temple that's been overgrown. And what better way to create an old temple than to create some temple walls that have all kind of broken down. Now, I really wanted to add in a lot of moss, but I didn't want to add in the moss decals. So instead, I used these dynamic mossy rocks, placed them really low down into the ground, kind of gave the idea that moss has just started to spread out from all of these different structures. And then just to blend it in a little bit more, add a little bit more detail, I do go through and add those decals, but not nearly as many as I would have if I had first started playing the game. And that's another tip. As you start playing the game, you're going to realize that these really cool new ways for you to build things. They're going to look truly awesome, and you're going to learn new techniques and new tips. And everybody's going to learn something new every day. Nobody's a perfect pro at Planet Zoo. You always are learning every day. So in acknowledgement that you can learn every day, I want to give a huge shout out to Alfred Supersauce, especially in our Discord community, who provided some fantastic feedback on the Baird's Tapir habitat, specifically revolving around foliage. Now, when it comes to foliage, I'm not going to say I'm a master at it. I think I've learned a lot of tips and tricks, but I'm not really where I can say that I truly understand how foliage works and how to place it all. Now, Alfred Supersauce provided some feedback in the sense that foliage islands are great ideas, but foliage islands don't have to be on the ground, they can be elevated. And that really is challenging me and changing how I thought about doing foliage. So in an effort to learn every day and learn something new, I've changed up how I want to do foliage in this particular build. And specifically, I'm going to go with the idea that less is more. So I'm not going to create these really intense looking, really lush looking foliage plots. Instead, I'm going to utilize a lot of bracken as our base, and then I'm going to work our way up from there. I'm going to try to have different little areas with lots of foliage and color, but it doesn't have to be widespread. Now, I think part of the reason why I always struggle with foliage as well is when you're building foliage in your habitat, you're right there, right next to it, so you can see everything. But we're also building it for our guests. So remember, always take a look back and check your sight lines, and make sure that the foliage looks good from the sightline, not necessarily from right next to it, because that really changes a lot. Case in point, there's really no foliage behind all these temple walls, so there doesn't need to be foliage there. And thematically, it makes sense, but old Gunther would definitely put a lot of foliage everywhere to fill up all that dead space. So with that initial area of foliage taken care of, it was time for us to start moving on to the next thing, which in this case is climbing structures. And we're not talking climbing structures for raccoons, we're talking climbing structures for big cats. And that's a change for me. I haven't actually ever really built a climbing structure for such a large animal before, so I tried some things, and again, it's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. The idea that I have for this, and when I was building this, we had one viewpoint which was right in front of the habitat, so everything I built was in mind that we're going to have one direction we're looking for. And when you look from that one direction, it works really well. You saw me checking the sight lines really carefully there. Now, as is the normal for my videos, it was time for us to start doing a rebuild, and I didn't include the full rebuild, but you see the end product here, which is our waterfall is gone, and in its place are some viewing sections. Now, on top of that, it looked pretty empty here. Again, we're seeing a lot of white, and I realize there's temple pieces that are colorable, but I don't really want to change the color of the walls, and that's the big problem I have. So to fill that up, instead I go with some foliage. And I tried to go very light with the foliage, not adding a whole lot. It's not going to be in the water itself. It's really on these really weird looking L-shaped lips that I've created. And it's funny, we created these to hide a bunch of terrain deforming. So what better way to hide terrain than to utilize some foliage? In a roundabout way, we've come full circle. Again, huge shout out to the Spanish moss, and then also added in some additional vines, added a lot of extra really cool looking greenery to this entire build, and so subtle yet so impactful. And then there's that perfect shot of what this new viewing station looks like. And there's a reason why I changed it up. First off, that waterfall looked terrible, and I'll be the first person to admit that. Sometimes you build something and it just doesn't look good. So go back and build it again. It's okay. It's okay to make mistakes in planetzoo. That's what this game is all about. So I made a mistake, I corrected it, and we're coming back to something super impressive. Now, you don't get to see the rebuild, and part of the reason why is because if we did show the rebuild, we would be here for a lot longer in this video. And I don't really want to keep you here for like half an hour while you watch me play around with a bunch of temple stuff. So instead, what you can do is head over to the channel, click on the live tab, and you can actually watch the live recording of me building this and just chatting about planetzoo in general with the rest of the community. Now, I've talked a lot about this community. It's our Discord community. It's growing. We're at like 130 members. I would love for anybody who hasn't joined to maybe come and hang out with us. We can talk more planetzoo, provide feedback in real life and live, and of course, join even more live streams talking about and building really cool things. Now we are on the other side of our habitat. And for those who are really good, you might have noticed that this side originally was a rock wall, and that rock wall has been replaced with a temple viewing station. And again, the temple didn't make it into this build, and part of the reason why is because it was like a 50-minute build just on temple bricks. Again, I don't think anybody really wants to watch that. But what I am going to do is our next episode of Igua Zoo is not going to be a speed build. It's actually going to be a tour of all of the stuff we've built, because we haven't really done a tour of the full zoo yet. So we'll take a quick look at what this zoo finally looks like, and we'll get a better, more in-depth look of this really cool looking temple, which I'm super proud of creating. So because we now have 3 different viewing stations for this habitat, we have to keep in mind that everything changes about how we're building. We now have to take into consideration 3 different angles. And one way to mask a lot of the exterior or the background of a habitat build is to focus on the foreground. And in this sense, on our waterfall side, we have the water. That makes total sense. On our main side, our original viewpoint, we have this little rock wall that we're gonna also add a climbing structure to. That makes sense. But on the temple side, we needed to add something else. So I added in a rock wall. And it's a mixture of these temple support beams and then this rock wall that came from the Barnyard DLC pack, a really cool blueprint that people can use. So I took it, ripped out all the foliage and placed it here. Kind of gives the idea that maybe some people have come back and they've tried to repair this area or create a fence out of some local rock and temple stone. But there's a reason why I've utilized this piece. I want to transition away from just building temple pieces in Igua Zoo, and I want to transition more over to classic 18th century South American architecture, so like really cool looking buildings and stuff like that. And maybe part of this inspiration is coming from Uncharted 4 and what we saw there, or what I saw there anyway. Who knows? But the idea behind it is we're going to transition away from temple builds, more into a populated area, kind of give it the idea that we've left this forest that's been overrun and we're moving into these really cool looking houses and buildings. So knowing that, we have a lot of additional work ahead of us in Igua Zoo, but we're not here to talk about what's next for Igua Zoo. We're here to talk about the Jaguar habitat. And you can see everything coming together and really utilizing a lot of that bracken to add the idea that we're in the midst of a forest without going too crazy. Remember, jaguars need places to hide, and the best way to hide is to go hide in all the brush. And just like that, we've hit the end of our speed build today. I've had a lot of fun, more fun than I probably had playing planetzoo in the past little while. So we're probably going to stick with these speed builds because I enjoy it. At the end of the day, that's what matters. As long as you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to have fun. So remember a few things. There's a link to our Discord community in the comments below. Please come and head over there, hang out with us, talk more things planetzoo. On top of that, if you want to support the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps us. Let me know that I'm doing a good job, but of course, no pressure. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much for your support and helping me build this truly amazing jaguar habitat. And as always, ciao for now.